Tonight, a special edition of Charlie Rose.
Since the Rolling Stones' inception in 1962, Michael Philip Jagger, better known as Mick, has been the lead singer and songwriter of the most successful band in rock and roll today. Along with guitarist Keith Richards, he has written some of the classic rock songs of the 20th century. Jumping Jack Flash. It's Only Rock and Roll. The band is currently on their most ambitious world tour to date. The 40 Licks Tour celebrates the 40th anniversary of the band, and there is a new greatest hits CD to go along with it. Jagger hasn't always been content with just leading the Stones. The ambitious and prolific singer has released 4 solo CDs that haven't matched the success of the Rolling Stones, but have been well received by the critics. And since 1970, he has had a side job as an actor. He has a love affair with the movies, and here's a brief look at some of his film work.
The only performance that makes it, that really makes it, that makes it all the way, is the one that achieves madness, right? Am I right?
Train can't be long now. Have you got the rockets, Jack?
Here, Ned.
Now understand this. Take the rockets down to the station and wait behind there until the train is wrecked. Then fire the rockets. Tom Lloyd and all our loyal friends and supporters are waiting in the hills. That's the signal for them to join us.
Carl Ernst.
Who's Carl Ernst?
What kind of world do you live in? Aren't you girls ever curious about what's going on?
Greta, don't lecture. Who's Carl Ernst?
George, actually.
What?
I'm George now.
Feel free to make any arrangements you like, but keep your people out of my way.
Why, Victor? Who do you think you're talking to?
I know who I'm talking to, Mark. An asshole.
His performance in The Man from Elysian Fields, he plays Luther Fox, the owner of an escort service, has earned him the best reviews of his acting career, and there is already some buzz of a possible Oscar nomination. Mick Jagger and I sat down in Los Angeles at the Four Seasons Hotel for a conversation during a break in the 40 Licks Tour.
Have you always wanted to be in the movies? To be involved in films?
Well, yeah, because I read this old interview I did when I was like 19 years old, and it says, what your ambition is to make a movie before I die, which is, I guess, accomplished. So I think, yeah, I mean, I think it was just one of those things that you just did. When I was a kid, being a pop singer, they made, if you were a pop singer, you made one bad movie.
Yeah, you got one.
You know, you made a really bad rock movie, and you know, I thought that's what I would do.
After performance, you said, gee, I may do one of these a year.
Yeah, well, I'd like to have done, but then, whatever, it just didn't happen. And
what was whatever?
Whatever was, you're on tour for like 2 years, and also you don't get very good roles. So, you know, when you come off the tour, then you don't get very good roles.
Because you're not out there looking for them. I mean, you didn't have a...
Well, you know, it's a very competitive business, acting. There's hundreds of thousands of people trying to act, and spending years of their life and killing to get parts. You know, it's not always that easy.
Well, 5% of the actors alive today are acting.
Exactly. And what do they say? There's 100,000 women in LA in one part.
Yeah, in one part.
In one role, yeah.
So, yeah, it's not funny if you're in that profession because you can die.
You know, I'm laughing, but it's not an easy profession, and there's a lot of out of work bits, and there's a lot of rejection, and there's a lot of disappointment, and people spending a lot of time training and doing very interesting things, and then the height of their career is, or their excitement for that year is a walk-on with a line. Yeah. I mean, I know a lot of people like that, but you know, whatever, that's your choice.
But a couple of years ago, you set up, Jagged Films. Mm-hmm. You were a producer for Enigma. Mm-hmm. And then this comes along. I mean...
Yeah, and I did this. And this was just a role that just came to me. I wasn't particularly went out to seek the role. It was just, the director just called me up out of the blue and just said, would you like to do this role? So,
and you read it?
So I read it, and you always read it and you go, yes, but no, you know. So, but he was great. The George Hickenlooper, the strangely named director, just an old American family. But anyway, the bits of the role were great, but they're not all suited to me. But the fun thing was he was very cooperative, and you know, he wanted me to give a lot of input into how to change the role to make it suit me, and how to take out some scenes and write others. And then there's a scene where, for instance, I was supposed to be dying in hospital or something, so I said, well, this is a bit depressing. So then we took that out and we substituted the scene that I have with Angelica Houston.
Which is one of the things people love about the movie.
Yeah, which is a really good scene, which wasn't in the original script, so we created that scene in a few days while the movie was being prepared or shot.
So was it a satisfying experience for you?
Yeah. It was, because it was very quick, and I didn't have a lot of time to think, and I didn't have a lot of time to write backstories, and I didn't have a lot of time to get worried, and I just did it, you know, really. And I had a lot of help doing it. I had a friend of mine from London who's a theatre director, and he helped me a lot with getting my dialogue improved slightly, certain scenes with the help of the original writer, and you know, and helping me with the, you know, preparing for the scenes, because we didn't have a lot of time to prepare. There just wasn't any time.
Any reservations about the role?
No, I don't think so.
Yeah, you liked it.
I mean, I liked it, and what I didn't like, I changed, and I found that the scenes that I was in were quite pithy and to the point, and there wasn't a lot of rambling.
Is it a problem for you when you do this that you got to say, okay, one of the things I got to make sure is I want them to see a character on screen. I don't want them to see Mick Jagger.
Yeah, that's... But I mean, yeah, I think that's true, but I think that's true of anyone that's not a character actor. I mean, I think that's true of any sort of big name actor that comes across as a certain kind of personality, or anyone that's been a lot in a TV series where they're very identified with a certain person, you know. If you always play, let's take this, like Sopranos, for instance. Yeah, but exactly. I mean, you know, once you play the lead character in The Sopranos, it must be quite hard for people to accept you. You know, so that you...
Oh, sure. You know, there have been American actors in television shows that have never been able to, like Carol O'Connor, who played Archie Bunker. Right. You know, was lifted from a British show. Mm-hmm. And Carol O'Connor was always identified as Archie Bunker forever after that.
And that's the danger of the success of a series like that.
And then on the other hand, you have people who, in a sense, they say are playing themselves over and over and over, whether it was, say, Cary Grant or...
Yeah, well, Cary Grant's a great example of that. I mean... Or Hugh Grant, to take another Grant. Though he's tried to sort of branch out, and I think he does really well, but for a long time played the same.
And he played the same guy for a while.
Yeah, plays the same guy. And he knows it, and he always makes funny references to it in these, like, when he does these award shows.
I know. I saw him in New York recently, and he said he was making fun of himself.
Yeah, exactly. I thought that was really good.
The Fashion Award or something like that.
You know, the critics always say that I play the same role, and he won't like. And people don't like it when you step out. I mean, the one movie I remember where Cary Grant plays a Cockney Englishman was like the worst thing he ever did. It was just awful. And that's when he stepped out.
He wasn't playing Cary Grant.
But, I mean, that's a success, playing the same character, or what people think is the same character. For you, it's slightly different every time, I guess.
Tell me who Luther is, or was, or...
He is a rather dissolute, sad Englishman that's been in Los Angeles too long, I should think.
There's a message there.
I'm leaving. I've only been here a week.
I've read Luther, and I know. He can't stay too long without it having some kind of impact on you. So he's a guy...
He's a guy that's, I don't know, in my backstory, I imagine he thought he was going to be an actor, and then he was one of those guys that just didn't, that we talked about earlier, who didn't get any work.
So it kind of ends up as an escort.
He ends up running an escort. He probably started out as as one of the guys in an escort agency and ended up running one.
Yeah, and he ends up hiring Andy Garcia, who was a novelist, who was also having difficulty making ends meet.
He brings him into this thing, but when you actually see it, when I've seen the movie a couple of times, when I was playing it, it seemed pretty harmless the way and with a lot of humour that he brought Andy Garcia into his net, but actually it was a very mean thing to do because it obviously ruined his family, and he the character, Luther Fox character, must have realised how bad that is for someone with a family. You know, so
and does that play into his own disillusionment at the end about who he is and what he's doing, and one last chance with Angelica to...
Yeah, he doesn't... Yes, I mean, I don't think he has any moral qualms about bringing the Andy Garcia character in, but at the same time, he wants to change his life somewhat, and tries to throw the dice with this one, and it doesn't...
Shape the character yourself. I mean, what did you looked at this and said, you know what, here's what I think about this guy, and here's what I think we ought to make sure that he is.
Well, he has to be a lot of things. He has to be, in a very short screen time, he has to be a lot of things. He has to be witty and amusing, seductive.
Okay, this is easy.
All these
so what
things. Yeah, that's just... No, but they have to be, have to be all those things. But then the added thing that we threw into the mix was his innate sadness and reflecting, and his becoming friends with the Andy Garcia character and seeing himself, his own problems and his own self-defeat in the Andy Garcia character, because they've both fallen on very hard times, and seeing the disillusionment of both of their lives is paralleled, and that was if you want the interesting thing about the character, but also the most difficult to show in the short amount of scenes that there were.
I want to compare Churchill to acting, but Churchill once said on entering 10 Downing at the beginning of World War II, everything I have done have prepared me for this moment, in a very serious way.
That was a very serious moment, yeah.
But did you find that in this particular, what everybody is saying is a terrific performance by you, but the music, everything else that you had done, in a sense, gave you something, your own relationship to men and women and understanding of relationships?
Yeah, I think, obviously, that if you're... It's the same with anything, with writing or music or acting or anything at all, creative. The more experience you have of life, the easier it is to bring those experiences to bear on your creativity. If you're a naive, innocent 17-year-old, it's hard to write with conviction about those things. You can still try, but you can't really do it. So, of course, all your emotions and experience you bring to bear on the character, and that's not necessarily an intellectual thing that you're running through. It's not an intellectual process. I just think you don't know why you don't know your facial expressions and your flickering of interest and lack of interest that you have to kind of create. That's not really an intellectual process at this level. Not for me anyway.
What kind of process is it for you?
It's an instinctual process for me. So.
So all the things that you are come to play.
Yes, they
not
must.
Because you call them up, but because they are who you are.
You can only any actor can only play who they. You can't play who you're not. It's not possible to do that. So you can only bring that to bear, but it doesn't want to be too obvious, and it doesn't want to be too leaden, and it doesn't want to be. You can't bang people over the head with it.
Is any part of you that wishes that you had done this and had this kind of role earlier, that it might have meant at an earlier time a more deeper involvement in acting?
Yeah, I think that I mean, yeah, I would have liked to have done lots and lots. I enjoy acting very much, and I find it stimulating if I get into these kind of situations where you're able to create an interesting character, and you have a lot of help as far as just letting you get on with it and doing it your own way. But as I said before, it's a very difficult business, and it's not my main business in life. And
might it become your main business in life?
I don't see it becoming my main business in life. It's something I love doing, and if I'm in the right place in the right time and get the right thing. I'm very happy to do it. I love doing it, and I find it a fascinating process. Like the rest of the things we talked about before. I mean, producing movies is also another interesting intellectual process where you get. I mean, it depends on what kind of producer you are, but getting involved in a literary part of, say, the movie that I produced, Enigma, was very interesting. I mean, that was a fascinating, with two wonderful writers, one a novelist and one a playwright, to sort of deal with both of them and their adaptations of each other's work.
But did you get the same kind of satisfaction from being the person who's putting it together as a producer than you got from acting in this?
Yes, it's a different kind, but
it has equal weight.
It has equal weight, and it's a different kind of intellectual part of your life, you know, than writing songs and that's one creative form. Performing those songs in front of a lot of people, which is another completely different thing, and then balancing up different creative people and trying to get them on and judging whether their adaptations are going to work and so on, or creating a character or helping to interpret a character and adding to it. They're different, completely different facets of creativity and interpretation.
Yeah. Do you sense about life that it just happens? You know, you can't plan it. I mean, when you think back about the beginning of the Rolling Stones, I mean, you just wanted to play music, and you were in love with American music, a music that had roots with whether it was Muddy Waters or Chuck or whoever it was, and then all of a sudden.
Yeah, but you don't know when you're young how to necessarily get all the things that you want, but you know what you're interested in, you know what fascinates you, you know, and then you know what drives you. But it's not completely true that things just happen to you. That's a very, I mean, I'm not like one of these people that a romantic view of life. It's just a wonderful 19th century.
Hang out and
I know.
He'll come along.
It's a wonderful romantic view, and here I'm in my garret and I'm starving hungry, and one day someone's going to discover me and I'm going to be rich. And
it's not going to happen.
It doesn't. Well, it's a wonderful view, and it's happened to lots of people.
But it's certainly the exception rather than the rule.
Yeah, I mean, people can to kind of plan themselves and say, okay, this is who I am, this is what I want to do, and this is how I'm going to go about it. I mean, this country and our civilization generally, we're full of self-help and how to motivate and go for our goals and
find your real self.
This isn't. I mean, this isn't where you just. This isn't a country where you just sit and wait and. For things to happen to you. It's not really
certainly not this country.
No, and certainly not any country I know in the Western world, really.
Yeah. I mean, is there any part of you that thinks you're more American than British?
They're very similar things. They're not the same things, but they're very similar. We share so many different things. Obviously, we have. Was it Churchill that said separated by the same language?
Yeah, exactly. Right. No, but, Churchill. No,
but I mean, that's just quibbles. I mean, we have so many things in common. And you know, I've lived in America for such a long time, and on and off, and spent perhaps half my adult life here. So I'm sort of in tune with both.
But we think of Americans as being more sort of constantly. I mean, British. My friends in Britain sometimes will say, slow down.
Well, that thing, yeah. That's true. But you can... There's parts of the United States...
And my friends in Italy will say, slow down even more.
Even more, yeah. And your friends in the south of Italy will say, slow down. And you...
Stop and let's have some wine and some food.
You know,
I mean, what is life about, after all?
I noticed, even in a big town like Atlanta, was much slower.
Yeah, exactly.
As soon as we got to Atlanta, the pace started to get to... more British type of pace.
Where does this take you? I mean, has this experience made you say, wow, I really want to rev up my interest in acting because this has given me, for the lack of a better word, a platform? People are taking notice.
I think it's true that people take notice and they take you seriously if you do a good piece of work that people like and you get reviewed well, and they go, well, oh, okay. And I always say, well, I could have done that, you know, anyway, but to that extent, you have to wait until the right thing comes along for you. But,
listen to this. I'm going to flatter you, but play with this. Variety said about you in this role, he adds some unexpectedly human and melancholy notes to his role. Boston Herald, the most effective film performance since Performance, and that Luther is the reluctant soul of the movie.
It's nice, isn't it?
You,
Charming.
what is there to say? All right?
This is really what I can say. What more can I say? Stop, please.
Stop flattering me.
Please don't flatter
want any of this. Exactly. All right. This is another one said, hey, I'm trying to find if any of this resonates with you in terms of the character and your work and what you were hoping to achieve. A picture of decrepit elegance.
Thank you. I could be more decrepit and more elegant.
And more elegant. He wears beautifully sharp tailored suits which bring out his innate elegance. Touching about the way he captures the reluctance to give in to old age and uselessness. Talking about Luther.
Uselessness.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's really the point you brought to this character.
Yeah, but yes, he does feel that he's worried that his life is useless. The same way as the Andy Garcia character is going nowhere. So not, you know, he spends 7 years. I think Andy's character says, "I spent 7 years of my life on this novel," and the woman throws it in the remainder bin.
Yeah, right.
You know, and so life is completely useless. You know, even though he's younger. But I mean, how many more novels can he write before he's old? And anyway, so yes, I mean that's the problem he has. But you know, he has to pick himself up and think about life.
Resonates with regret and a sense of compromise. That's Luther.
Yeah, lots of regret. I'm not sure about compromise. I
work so hard to maintain. Talking about you as a person. Yeah, to maintain an aura of youthfulness, and here he looks his age.
Well, that's the idea of in the role. You know, I wasn't trying to act like a kind of rock singer on stage, being full of beans and energy. Yeah. That's a different role. You know? That's another role.
That's the one we save for 40 licks.
I saved that one.
Anything difficult about this for you? This business of acting?
No.
Well, I mean, I'm not sure. I'm not suggesting it should be.
I
mean, in other words, does it at this stage in your life come easy, in a sense, reasonably easy once you get into the character?
I tell you what, the thing about acting is very different from being on stage, where you're an actor on stage, which I've never actually been. But I've never acted as a theatre actor, yeah, right. Which is very different, because as a theatre actor or a singer, you walk out on the stage and you give a 2-hour performance. Yeah. And you start and then you go on for 2 hours and you end. Whereas in a movie, you go to the set and you're supposed to be doing the scene with Angelica at 11:30 a.m., but you know the set's not working, it's not lit, and the sun's again, and you're sitting there and it's 7 o'clock and you're hungry and you start to feel you've got a terrible headache and you've been there since 7 in the morning and you start to look really crummy and you've forgotten the scene and what are you doing here? And then suddenly you're on when you think you're going to go home. And suddenly you're on, and you have
that almost impossible.
And you have to do the scene which you prepared to do 9 hours before, and you've been sitting around and eating a lot, or reading a book, and you're just not. And so that's the difficult little discipline. Whereas, as I said before, going onto the stage, you know you're on at 9, and you get ready at 9, you go on at 9, and
you can, in a sense, ratchet up your performance when you know you're ready.
Exactly. Whereas in movies, it's not really like that, and you have to be really on for those 2 minutes. Yeah. For that 2-minute scene with Angelica or whatever it is, you have to be ready to do that anytime, and that is quite difficult to do, and people have to be able to do that, and it's completely different talent.
I may have asked you this before, but I mean, that time that you said I'm going to do a movie every year, and then it was 10 years later before you did it, there was nothing about acting you disliked. It's that you never saw anything that you wanted to do.
Maybe there was nothing I wanted to do that was given to me. I got a lot of roles to play rock singers, which it wasn't really that intricate. After I did Performance, which was a very twisted film, and it was about a rock singer, but it was really a good role.
Well, I perform. I bet you do. I can tell by your vibrations. Anti-gravity man! Amateur night at the Apollo. Chaos in his bloody pyramid. He dug a juggle or two, didn't he? Remember?
But after that, I got a lot of roles to play rock singers or heroin addicts and things like that. And I just sort of shied away from them and didn't want to do it. None of them were that great movies. There's one or two that I regret that I can't even remember whether roles that I did turn down or I just couldn't do because I was working.
Did you ever see a role that you said, I wish I had taken it? Because, boy, that's something I would have loved to have done.
There was someone, I can't remember the numbers.
You want to direct?
The actors always say they want to direct. It's like such a
I promise you I'm not proud of the question.
It's such a cliche. Do you want to direct?
Yeah.
You know, do I want to be a lighting cameraman? I don't know. You know, it's all very fascinating.
Or has the artist in you had a chance to come out?
It's I don't know. It's a fascinating occupation.
You know, how's this tour been for you? 40 Licks.
Tour's going well. We're sort of coming to the. We've done 2 months out of what a 9-month tour, so it's quite a long way to go. So, but it's been fun so far.
I was 12. I was washed up and left for dead. I fell down to my feet and I saw their blade. And I frowned at the crumbs of a crust of bread. I was down with spikes right to my head. But it's
How much difference does it make about the songs and when you get together to write the songs for a tour and for an album?
Yeah.
You know, I mean, does the fact whether you really get into those songs make a difference in terms of how the tour goes?
No. It doesn't really. It's good that you have new songs, but the challenge is to play the whole set with intensity and as you mean it every time you walk out there, which is not always possible. I mean, you're doing. So what we did on this tour, we tried to keep the interest flowing. Was we're doing 3 different kinds of shows. So here in Los Angeles, we're doing this arena show we did last night, and then we're doing the.
That's your
stadium
idea.
show, yeah, and then we're doing a theatre on Monday. So we've got 3 different set lists, and there's 3 different challenges. So we know in the theatre show we can do a lot of unknown numbers. So we're kind of up for that.
Baby, I can't stay. You got to roll me. Call me the somebody die.
No matter how much creativity goes into what you do in terms of planning a tour and all the talk about how you are, the guy who really pays attention to the detail of a tour, is that anywhere approaching the sensation of going on stage and performing?
No, it's nothing to do with it. That's like producing a movie. So, but it's interesting because you have to do all that prep. The most difficult part of the tour, a lot of it is in the preparation of it.
Yeah, it's same in everything.
Same as in preparation of a movie.
Political campaigns, movies, everything else.
It's not going to work if it starts well, and it will probably end well. If it starts badly, it will probably end
clearly
well.
badly.
Yeah. So it's very important you get all the preparation right.
Why you though?
Well, I mean, I don't do as much as I used to because I've got some very good people that I've been working with for, say, over maybe 9, 10 years now, that I trust to run the various departments of the tour. So I don't have to be so crazily detail conscious as I used to be.
Crazily detail conscious.
Well, but nevertheless, you still have to review the show. It's very boring, and you watch the videos and you look at it and you make notes and you talk to people and say, not that shot, that video shot, not that one, not that one, not that one, because people, it's very subjective and it's your show, so you don't want to completely leave it to other people. And that people I can get lazy on stage, and other people in the organisation also get lazy, so you have to constantly vibe it up.
How do you make a decision as to when you're going to go on tour? I mean, just all of a sudden you take a couple of years off and you say it's time? Or?
More or less. But you have. So that's. I know it sounds very casual, but
I thought it'd be very scientific. And you took all these audience surveys and you said the world is ready for another tour.
Up to a certain point, you can do that. It doesn't. That doesn't work completely scientifically. But I mean, a good example of that is what the Rolling Stones are very big in Argentina, where we play lots and lots of shows. Now, the economy in Argentina is falling to pieces, so we don't go to Argentina. So, that is it. So, but if you have a real downturn in the economy, then touring is not always a viable option.
Is there a country you want to go to you've never been? I mean, have the Rolling Stones ever performed in China?
No, we haven't performed in China, but we're hoping to do it next year.
Next year?
Yeah, we're planning to go.
A new tour?
Well, it's the same
tour.
It's the
so
same.
40 Licks will come to
It keeps
Beijing.
going. It keeps going. Once we left Los Angeles, it still continues. Life goes on.
And they'll still hear Satisfaction.
Yeah, and so we're supposed to go to China next year. I'll believe it when we get there. And
oh man, that's great though.
No, it should be good. We're supposed to play Shanghai and also
2 billion Chinese have not yet experienced the Rolling Stones.
So there you go.
That's a lot of tickets.
We can get a few thousand in there, maybe. We'll see.
Anywhere else other than China?
India also.
India
also, which is.
Now you travel in these countries.
I've been travelling, but I've never played it.
Yeah, I mean India. I know more people who find India to be one of the most interesting places for them. You know, they'll come back to me and they'll say, God, you've got to go to India. There's something mystical, or do you find that?
I find India a fascinating place. It's very colourful and lots of different cultures, and it's one of them. It's really an ancient culture with the most ancient world religion in it.
One of the great things about touring is you meet people like Bill Graham.
Yeah, so Bill Graham. Well, Bill Graham was a wonderful character, you know, but he was doing this Amnesty tour. You mentioned India before. So he's on the tour with Amnesty in India, and he phones me up, and he'd never been to India. And he phoned me up from the penthouse suite of the Taj Hotel in Bombay or somewhere like that. And he said, Mick, this is a great, wonderful place. So I said, but it's a problem. Here I am drinking champagne. I look out of the window, and there's poverty-stricken kids in the street with nothing. What do I do? And I said, Bill, I don't know, but just, what about don't drink the champagne? I said, okay, that's okay.
I feel better already. I feel better already.
Poor Bill. Yeah. People do get upset, though, touring India, though.
Because they see, especially the
they see
kids in the street.
They see poverty that they've never seen before.
When you are performing in this tour, what songs have you got to sing, or else the audience is going to be disappointed?
I honestly don't know. I think you just got to sing certain amount of well-known tunes. I think you can leave some out, but as long as you do others, half a dozen favourite tunes to a certain audience. I mean, when you play in a theatre, you don't have to play those half dozen tunes
at all.
At all.
What's an audience in the theatre?
How many? You mean?
Yeah,
like 1,000, maybe 1,500, maybe 2,000. Yeah. Then you don't have to play any, which is the kind of fun of it, really, because you're not forced to play any well-known tunes. But in a bigger place, like you get sometimes the feeling like that people, like, I mean, there's a certain audience that comes to an event, you know. So, I mean, you go to a baseball game, you want to see the star batter hit the ball.
Exactly,
you do not,
right.
you know.
You want to see Barry Bonds hit it out of the park.
Yeah,
That's
and
why
if you
you're
don't,
there.
it's kind of disappointing. So the analogy is that you've got to do a great, 6 of those tunes that everyone knows. You have to do on because of women's satisfaction, blah, blah, blah. Yeah. And then you've got to do them well and with enthusiasm. And
Of all the ones you've written, which ones are you? What are the 4 or 5 that you just?
I don't know, really. I mean, I like all the really well-known tunes. I like doing them. I can bring things to them. I can bring things to Satisfaction and Sympathy for the Devil and Angie and all these tunes. And I can do those every other night. Every other night.
Tears must be cried. So let's do some living. After love died, 'cause wild horses couldn't drag me away.
When you set out with Keith, you two met each other when you were how young?
About 4 years old, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah. We're very, very young. We were on the same block, more or less.
You put the band together when? When
we were about 18.
Did it develop into certain kinds of roles immediately, that you did the lyrics and he did the melody, or?
Yeah, we started off doing. I mean, to be honest, the singer has to help with the melody because you're the singer and you're singing the melody. So if you want to change it, you change it. So you do the melody the way you can. Quite often you can't sing the melody that's written. Yes, so, I can't do that. I'll flatten it out.
We'll sing my melody, or I can't do
no
it.
melody at all. So you get involved in melody, and then later on, of course, you change the way you work. You're not going to work like that all the time. So I write lots of melodies and Keith writes some lyrics.
Is writing easy for you?
Yeah.
It is?
I find writing very easy. Now, whether it's any good or not is another matter, but just the process of it, you know, I don't seem to have problems. Once I sit down for it, say I'm going to write for a couple of weeks, I go and write.
But don't you two go off together to the Barbados or somewhere and do it together?
We will do that, but I do it on my own as well, and Keith will do it on his own, and I write with other people sometimes, and there's tons of ways of writing. It's rather interesting because there's lots of ways of doing it. You don't just sit with a guitar, or I don't just sit with Keith and write. I mean, that's not really how it works.
How does it work?
Well, you can write with machines and computers and drums, or you can sit with a drummer, or you can sit with a keyboard player, or you can just write lyrics and then fit the lyrics to a melody. You can write melodies and fit them to later lyrics, and so on and so on.
You tried to write a memoir once, didn't you?
I was offered a lot of money to write a memoir.
And then you wrote a couple of pages and said,
I said, this is really dull.
This is not for me.
You can take the money back.
Yeah.
I didn't find
you gave the money back and said, I don't really want to do it.
I don't want to do it. Yeah. I didn't find it interesting. I think that for me, you know, that celebrity memoirs are a kind of genre of literary genre, if you can call it that. And there are some good ones.
Rarely.
But they stand out nevertheless. Yeah. There are some quite good ones. The Dirk Bogarde ones were very good.
Exactly. It was the best, probably.
They were
as an actor. Yeah.
But mind you, Dirk Bogarde did write a lot. I mean, he was known as an actor, but I think he wrote a lot of things.
And he had a fascinating story to tell.
Yeah, and he didn't just write about his life, and he did write other books. The Peter O'Toole one was quite good also.
It was. It was especially good.
Yeah. But as a genre, it's mostly pretty tacky. And money is the thing that dictates a lot of these celebrity books. So they will give you lots and lots of money if you write, mostly about sexual things. Right. You know, so they're not really interested in a book unless it's full of sex. So,
speaking of sex,
speaking of which, you know, chapter 1. You know, do we really want to do that? You know, I'm not sure if I'm that interested in writing it. That book. I mean, there's lots of interesting books that one could write.
You read a lot.
I do.
You really do
like to read a lot.
Fiction and non-fiction.
Yeah, I like to have one fiction and one non-fiction going at the same time.
What are you reading now?
What am I reading now? What's it called? It's a book. My non-fiction is a book about Captain Cook's a guy that follows in the footsteps of Captain Cook and goes around all the Pacific and American Northwest and so on, where Captain Cook, and I can't for the life of me remember, it's called Blue something. Yeah. It's by an American author who I'd never heard of, but it was highly recommended in the New York Times, so I bought it, and it's very funny. It's very funny, the current things where he goes to Hawaii and sees the state of the people now, and he goes to New Zealand, and then he writes historically at the chapter by chapter about what Captain Cook actually did. Then he writes about his experiences following in the footsteps. That's rather good. And the novel I just finished is, I'm not going to remember the guy's name either, but it's called The Illusionist, which is about a half Indian, half English boy growing up in India in the early part of the 20th century. It's a wonderful first novel by a music critic of The Observer, whose name it's a rather difficult name, so I've forgotten it.
Yeah. Anything you've ever wanted to do that you really haven't done?
Write a very good travel book.
Really?
Yeah.
You've wanted to do that?
I like travel books.
Do you keep a diary or notes or anything?
Very inefficiently.
Inefficiently? Meaning you get to it occasionally?
Yeah. It gets so busy, you know. I meant to write my story of my week in Los Angeles, but the week in Los Angeles is so... Like, when do people... You know, I always admire these people that lead these incredible full lives that yet write 10 pages of the diary every night. I mean, how do they do this? Because when I get... At the end, when it's 3 a.m. in the morning, the last thing you do is I guess you just be very disciplined. You sit down at your desk and write to him.
As you say that, I'm thinking they're all saying about you. I don't know how he does it. How does he lead this life that he does?
But you know, it's a full life being on tour there.
Let me just talk about Keith for a second. Tell me this relationship. Are you brothers?
No, Keith's an only child, so he would gravitate to, you know, having that kind of relationship with people, with me, or other people.
Yeah, but it's uniquely with you, isn't it?
Well, I mean, I think he has other friends. Also, Ronnie, he looks upon... I think that when you're an only child, you tend to search for your, you know, for a sibling that you didn't have, you know. Right. Well, I have a younger brother, so I don't really I know what it's like to have a brother, so I don't really, you know, need to look for substitutes. But I think that you do that so that so you look for that in younger or older people.
But my impression of you two is that no matter what you might differ over, there's some bond there that you inevitably know will come back. It just will.
I think that when you've known people for a very, very long time, you don't really have a lot to hide from them. You can't really, how do you say, impress them is not really the right word, but you can't hide your feelings and so on. You can't try and. You just are what you are, and they know you very well.
And when he
dissimulate is the word I was looking for.
And when he talks about the knighthood or being Sir Mick,
all that.
You don't care.
Not really. I mean, it's so obvious why he talks about it. You know, it's
which is what?
Well, first of all, he gets a lot more press if he talks about me, because how else is he going to get it? And then secondly, you work it out for yourself. I got one, he doesn't. What can you say?
Duh. So let's understand this. The reason he's complaining about you accepting is, one, it gets attention to him by complaining, and two, you have it and he doesn't, so he's complaining.
Of course. That's what a brother would do, isn't it?
That's what a brother would do. So he is like a brother.
Of course.
And there always will be. You guys will be playing music together until you are dead.
I think that's true,
Even when you've gone off to do solos.
Yeah.
You always knew you'd come back to the Stones.
Oh,
the Stones are always going to be there.
Absolutely. I think that the Stones has a sort of it's a fortunate and also slightly unfortunate thing that you have this long history, because in some ways you're put in a box with the Rolling Stones to do a certain kind of thing, behave in a certain kind of way. So, but I think that it has a great longevity and has a great history of all of its own.
What's the box?
Well, the box that you've created and other people have created for you.
The perception that you have to meet their perception.
Yes, exactly. That's the box that you're put in by yourself once, and the press another, and thirdly your own audience.
Okay, but I mean, I don't understand that. You mean this whole notion way back when, Mick is a bad boy. It's not that simplistic, is it?
No, it's not quite that simplistic.
You've got to be a bad boy because they expect you to be a bad boy, and therefore I'll be outrageous because they expect me to be outrageous.
I think the analogy with film is really like the James Bond series. You have a very successful thing, but if you go off it completely, it won't be successful anymore, I think. You know what I mean?
Exactly.
So it's a long-running thing. So there is a certain constraint within it, but within all things there are constraints, and within all things there are conventions.
Yeah.
Within art forms there are conventions. Even when you try and break them, you still, what are you doing? You're breaking out of a convention which you understand in the regular.
Sure. But I mean, think about music even. I mean, I remember Miles Davis, long conversation with Miles Davis.
Yeah.
I mean, he never wanted to be hemmed in by what he had done before.
No, but Miles Davis is a person alone. The Rolling Stones is a band.
Exactly.
You see, it's completely different if you're alone, a musician alone, and you're a real loner. Miles Davis, to my mind, was essentially quite a loner in time.
Oh, totally.
A real loner, whereas the Rolling Stones is a band, and by definition, not loners. There are no loners in the Rolling Stones, by definition.
Exactly. Because exactly.
Yeah. So it's totally different to Miles Davis. And so that Miles Davis, by metamorphosizing into all these different musical forms, achieved a lot of success, but he remained a loner, and the Rolling Stones are a much more traditional thing. So the problem is that if you're going to be with the Rolling Stones, that you to some extent, though I think the Rolling Stones have achieved a lot, the Rolling Stones have a very broad musical spectrum that they cover, from all kinds of different music. So that's a very broad thing, but it's still image-wise, and there's a certain restriction which you're bound to follow, which is good. I mean, most music has restrictions.
What are you proudest of about the Stones, other than longevity?
Well, their success, I suppose, is the other thing. I mean, there's the huge success over sort of bound together with the longevity. That success over longevity equals
I mean,
something.
that's a huge thing. When I say other than,
never,
you're like,
Plus, then the other thing to look at is forgetting about all that, throw all out the window, is the actual music itself and the things that are very difficult to quantify and qualify.
Is it tough to keep it fresh? Is it tough to keep it?
That's the, you know, people always talk about that. I don't particularly find it that difficult, but it is a challenge. It's always a challenge in any business, in any creative endeavour, to keep whatever you do fresh. And the Rolling Stones is the same as everything else. But yeah, it's not that easy, but it's not that difficult.
I mean, is there anything about the Stones that you, I mean, has everything that is to be said, written about the Stones been written? Because I just heard you say with great pride, some sense of appreciation for the breadth of the Stones, you know, the real sense of the musicality, not just this is the world's greatest rock and roll band, but that even more than that, that's a whole lot. And it's a whole lot to be the world's greatest rock and roll band for how many years?
Many.
Many. But I mean, you know, I hear some pride in there about the music
I'm very proud of it, and I'm very proud of the music the Rolling Stones produce and still play. You know, and the wonderful thing is that you produced a lot of material, a lot of different, very wide range of material with different feelings and different styles, from blues and country music and rhythm and blues and rock and roll and blah blah blah. All this.
That's it.
There's a lot there, so that you can then look at it. You know, as we started off rehearsal for this turn, you look at it, you say, "Wow, we did that," and then we did. Well, that is really odd. How did we manage to do that? That was really crap, and that was really great. And then you try and play all these different tunes in all these different ways, and say, "Well, we've got an awful lot of material here," and we started to, you know, really break into it for this concert tour, so it's been kind of fun.
I just want you to tell me this. You know, somebody said they assimilated American roots music, Muddy Waters, Motown, rockabilly, rhythm and blues, and achieved something unique on their own. And the uniqueness on their own is what?
Yeah. It's the sort of, I suppose it's the amalgam of all this stuff, you know, but, you know, lots of bands did this, and we produced our own version of it, you know, that's you know, you're bound to, because we tried so hard to copy all these things exactly, of course it didn't come out like that.
No, but that's what happens. You try to copy it, and then all of a sudden, but you're not just trying to copy Muddy Waters, you're trying to...
Yeah, well, we were, but then we realised we couldn't, so, you know, it came out this way instead.
And therefore you become unique and authentic, and you become yourself.
Yeah, if you do it for long enough, you become all those things.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Charlie. It was a very good interview.
I enjoyed it very much. Thank you so much.
Good.
Don't stop. Don't stop.